Welcome back to In Conversation With, Breaking the Silence series, where we have a guest on, or a friend, or both, and we talk about this subject matter. But today we have back Simon Bown, and you'll remember him for his book we talked about before, Verified Near-Death Experiences, Proof of the Afterlife, which is an excellent book. And a lot of people have read that book and are very grateful uh, for having read it, because it really, I think, opened up their minds. But now Simon, and I'm switching gears over here, has come out with a new book, which I can't wait to read all the way through. I've read some of it. It's excellent. Aspects of Alien Abduction, Shocking UFO Encounters, Volume 1. And I'm telling you, this is not just another book on alien abduction. And I'd like to welcome Simon back to the show to talk about this book, because I mean, it's just so well laid out, and just looking at the uh, I'm scrolling down to that section. Um, the list of the way you've broken this down in chapters or volumes, if you will, is incredible. Um, Now, Simon, you've always been interested in the subject. In fact, you've had an encounter yourself while driving that day at night, actually that night, um, which you talked about some, and then you talked about a great deal more on the last podcast we did, because you had hypnosis. Uh, and I would assume that you've kind of been thinking about doing a book like this all along. But was your becoming more in touch with your own experience something that really drove you to want to do this?
No, I don't think it was. No, it's this thing of being so fascinated by it and wanting to write about it for so long, but finding the right way to do it. And I realized that in my podcast, Alien UFO podcast, I've talked to at least 50 people who've had these experiences. And I was thinking, I started to form that idea of how I would lay out the chapters and use transcripts from the interviews. And so the couple of things about that is that these are people I've talked to myself. It's not like I'm watching YouTube videos and trying to research books. Everything in there is from a conversation I had with that person. And I was able to personally quiz them about what they were talking about. So that was really useful. And when I realized, hey, I could use these transcripts and I could lay it out, and also not just put transcripts in there, but try and do an analysis as well of each individual, and then try and put together like what does this all mean in each chapter? What is this showing us? And so that's what I've tried to do. I had two UFO sightings. One was really close up that I told you about, but it was only when I was three quarters of the way through this book that I had the hypnosis that really brought up the other
Oh,
experiences. And also, I got to a point where this book was 200,000 words, and I didn't want to put out a book that big, that long. So that's why I've chopped it in half. So there's volume one and volume two. And volume two is a whole other set of aspects that I'm examining in it.
you've had that rare opportunity, as you said, to actually talk to these people and have them on your show, and that gave you a lot of material to work with that other people writing books about this subject um, don't have access to, not unless they reach out to the person. And that means they'd have to reach out to a lot of people and have interviews with them. It's brilliant. And you did the same thing with verified near death experiences, again, for the same reasons. As you had a podcast and you had people on giving testimony about the near death experiences they have had. Um, Gave you that opportunity to write such a comprehensive book on this subject. I mean, by the time I was done, I mean, I already uh, know, I don't like the word believe, but I already know that we exist beyond our brain. Obviously, that when we cease to exist physically, we continue on as consciousness. And I've always knew that. Um, but for people who might be a bit on the fence, I don't know how they could still be on the fence after reading your book, because um, it lays it out. And there are just things that happen over and over again in the testimony of unrelated people that verify, as it says, verified near death experiences. Proof of the afterlife is that it would be, in my mind, impossible for someone to die on the operating table, be completely certifiably dead, and yet be able to go, just as one example, into the waiting room and see everything from what one of their family members was reading and what page they are on and what the chapter name was, to what was going on in the operating room and exactly what instruments were brought in, which people went in and out, and describe them to a T. Once would be enough. But for as many times as that same thing happens in the testimonies you dealt with, I don't know how anyone could walk away from that without knowing that there's something to this, then it's more than just coincidence. And so I'm getting that this new book hopefully will have the same effect.
Well, yeah, I hope so. And that's something I do go into a little bit in the book, is this idea that some people kind of suggest that the abduction isn't physical. It's like it's an out of body abduction in some way, like the consciousness has been taken, and brings more confusion into it. And there's people who, like Mike Clellan said this, and Sev Tok said this, that they were at a point where they were kind of standing and there were all these greys there, and they were saying to the greys, you didn't tell me it was going to be this hard to be a human when I agreed to take on this life. So we see this thing of the afterlife showing up in the abduction phenomenon as well.
They're connected. And as far as it, well, I'm sure you've come to conclusions that many of us have, and is as this experience evolves from the very physical beginnings, and the body marks and the memories of how physically you feel, and finding dirt in the bed and all that kind of stuff, that 30 years later, it's become much more interaction on a conscious, almost telepathic level, or even through our dreams, that we're dealing with the very same consciousness that used to come and get us physically.
Yeah, there's people have very vivid dreams of alien contact, don't they? And channeled sort of things. I talked to a woman the other day, Jessica Bryan is her name, and she describes it as something that comes up in meditation. And it's like watching a movie. It's not in her mind. She said it's with her third eye. And these aliens show up, and different people. And over the years, she has been healed by them, like severe stuff. And it's all in her book. But she doesn't really have any memories of any physical contact. There was one point she was walking through a park and she saw a grey in a bush looking at her, trying to hide.
Uh-huh.
And another time she woke up in the middle of the night. She was sitting down and she could just see her feet, and they were on a metal floor, but she has carpet. And it was just an instant, like, wake up, see it, and then back to sleep again. So there's definitely something going on with her. And it's that thing of people who don't know about this subject think, oh, it's just, they take you, and if they put you on a table, they do some physical exams, and it's almost like they think these are scientists who are doing research into humans. And then people start making jokes about anal probes and things. They don't realize just how complicated it is, and how these experiences can be so different for so many people. Like, some people have experiences that seem to be really quite pleasant, very happy, and then
Mm-hmm.
others have terrible experiences. And there's this one guy in my book talking about how he hates the Greys so much. They picked him up when he was a small kid, and it's been going throughout his life, and it's been horrific. And then there's another woman in my book who talks about being excited to see the UFOs coming down her backyard, and she wants to run down the stairs and meet these ETs that are coming out of the UFO. So it gets that thing of there isn't just one agenda, is there? It's like there's one set of aliens, they've got one agenda, and that's it. There's all sorts of things going on.
That's right. But also it's perspective, and it's the individual person. If the individual person has lived a life that um, has been difficult, especially in childhood, um, they may look at the grays, no matter what their intentions, or any other visitor, for lack of a better expression, um, as being something that's a threat, and nothing they can do or say is going to change that. And people get very stubborn that way. And I've found this not a great deal, but I have found it. But overall, most of the people, especially the people that have sort of formed around the Breaking the Silence community, um, are the latter. They feel that, like, for instance, Debbie Couple, who I know you know, and you know what she's had to say about her experience, that she would not change anything about what's happened to her and go back to the person she was before it happened. She likes the person she is now much, much better, and she feels smarter and more aware uh, of her surroundings and nature and the universe, and she just wouldn't change a thing despite all the hardships. And I hear this over and over again. I do.
Yeah, and there's I wish I could remember everybody's name. There's so many people in the book. There's a guy talking about the Arcturans coming to see him, these humanoids that were blue,
Yeah.
and they come and see him when he's very young, and then the Greys show up, and they're mean to him, and these Arcturians don't interfere until he's much older, maybe 40, 50 years old. And it's like he asked these Arcturians, why did you just let the Greys do this to me? And they said, this is part of your life path. This is what you needed to make you the person you are today. And I think one of his stories in my book is that he was small, like 7 or 8. He was
Mm.
asleep in between his parents in their bed. And he woke up, these two big Greys there, and they just told him to get out of the bed. And he refused. And they grabbed the mother's arm and put this vision in his head and said to him, if you don't come with us right now, we will murder your parents. And this vision he had was this terrible stabbing of both his parents. So he kind of gave in to them and went with them. And then he said they took him onto a ship and did horrific things to him. So point of that seems it might have been agreed to before he was born, but it was to sort of train him in some way or give him something so that the man he is today, it couldn't be the man he is today without having experienced that.
Yeah. You know, an interesting thing that you brought up was the woman that has contact with them in meditation, and that um, we meditate every morning, and sometimes other times too, just to gain some calm and peace in ourselves. And I don't think I shared this with you the last time we spoke, but it was in meditation, and all of a sudden, I remember now. I in my meditation called out and I said, "Are you really there? I mean, can you hear my thoughts?" Or something along that line. And then suddenly I saw that mantis that I saw that time I came to briefly in an auditorium with all these people, very much like what Susie Hansen describes. And there was someone on stage talking, and I believe he had robes on. And I remember something over here looking at me, and I looked over at it, and that it was the same thing that I remember happening, except this was a meditation, and it wasn't just having a memory, it was happening again. I mean, the being knew I was looking at him, and it was a mantis type, and it took me back to the first day, first grade in school, and asked me to remember how I felt when I was in that classroom with all those other people. And I told him how I felt, and I came out of meditation, and I was emotional and just really shook by the whole thing. This stuff happens during meditation as well. I'm finding, and I don't have to be physically taken. But I thought I'd share that with you just to add to the data pool that a lot of the
Yeah.
people I'm talking to now in the show are talking about this as well. So this is, I don't know if it's something different, but it's something that's more prevalent now.
Yeah, can we just pause for a second?
Yes.
My earbuds are playing up and I can't hear you properly. I'm just gonna put them away and get my headphones out. Sorry about
Okay.
this.
It's all right.
Get my small ones. Right.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway, so what I was saying was that it's become more prevalent that communications happen during meditations with a lot of the people have been having experiences for a very long time. And you really doubt, you can't help but doubt it. It's so striking. It's, you know, be in meditation, suddenly you're visually somewhere else and there's a being looking at you and you want to open your eyes up, but then again you don't want to, because if you open it up your eyes to check to see if you're really in reality, it'll go away. And I didn't want it to go away. Um, it was really phenomenal.
I think this is something I've heard from other people is how the interaction, the contact has changed over life. And the older people get, they say the more it seems to be kind of spiritual or out of body or through meditation rather than any physical interaction.
Yeah, although it still does, the physical stuff still does happen. And you talked about how we agreed to do this. And it's funny, when I first started almost 3 years ago now, breaking the silence, I used to talk about that, that I knew that I had agreed to come here. Um, I also agreed when I was a child not to speak about it, what was happening, for my own safety. And then bit by bit, ever since then, more and more people have been coming out, and not because they heard me, because it's something that, or maybe it is because they heard me or they heard others talk about it, but it was something we did when we were kids, and to keep from having harm brought to us, having people think we were crazy and having us go into special classes or God knows what. Um, but now that other people are talking about it, other people are coming forward. Yeah, I was there too. In fact, you talk about the classroom in your book. I haven't got to that part yet, but um, I know you're familiar with Susie Hansen. And when I was reading her book, I got to the part where she was with all these other children and on a craft with the Greys. And we were kind of instructing, and they were creating three-dimensional objects and moving them with their minds. And that really grabbed me, and I got all emotional because it was one of those things that I put down to my childhood imagination. I remember things like that, and I remembered them coming all the time and taking me, and it just seemed too much and too crazy, and so I didn't talk about it. But now people are talking about it, and you did, so you covered some of that in your book. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, that's right. There's different scenarios in the book as well, but exactly what you're describing, Terry Lovelace talks about when he was a kid with these objects. He said if you picked them up, you couldn't feel them. It's like they had no weight. But there was a pyramid and there was a sphere and a cube, and they're all
That's
different
right.
colors, and they were moving them with their mind.
That's right.
And yeah, and then there's another classroom scenario where people are shown symbols. This is in my book, and there's something about the symbol that contains a ton of information, and they were kind of taught telepathically, this is what this symbol means. And then this one woman talks about how she was tested on that. They put her in a maze and she had to find a way out just by looking at the symbols that were there on the floor.
Wow.
And yeah, there's one about this guy going into it, and it was actually a classroom. He said he was sitting at a desk, and there was a
Huh.
being at the front that was. He said it was made out of electricity. It was like a stick figure, and it had a wand, and it was building these geometric shapes in the air. And he said this was showing him how the universe is made. These are the building blocks of the universe. That's what that class was about. So there's several people in there who've different descriptions of a classroom environment where they're being taught something.
And Tim Caney, who's been on our show a couple times, we did a film about his experiences. He talked about a stick figure of electricity with another being standing in the doorway of his bedroom.
That might be the same because I think Tim's in the book,
Is he in the
and
book?
he said he named the stick figure Simon.
Right.
So, so that's why I remember that quite well.
I wonder if that's why I called them when I was a kid the Lightning People. That was the that was the name in of the first part of my movie. But something is there. You saw it, and
Yeah,
the very first story is called the Lightning People. That's very interesting. Wow. I can't wait to read all through it, but just looking at the subjects you've got listed here, you talk about you haven't left anything out that I can see. Screen memories, high strangeness, marks on the body, plenty of those. The hybrids, the aliens themselves, which we're not talking just about grays, we're talking about a lot of different beings. Millab, I dealt with that briefly. I never want to deal with it again. Healing. Um, the closing is the shape of the phenomenon. That's a really nice uh, description of a chapter. The pattern in testimony, sightings, uh, childhood experiences, and of course, what I read before, classroom. Um, what I'd be curious to know what you've heard from people about the hybrids. Now, I just had a person who I'm editing now, her show, named Beth Ward. Are you familiar with her?
no, I'm not. No,
I wasn't either. And she contacted us because she saw um, Breaking the Silence, and she felt that we were people she could talk to. So she contacted us through our website, the Breaking the Silence project on WordPress, and wanted to be on the show. And of course, I told her, well, you got to be sure you want to go public with this stuff because of what it can do to your life, especially your job, your career. But that wasn't a problem for her. And when she came on the screen, I was kind of shocked because right away she looked familiar. And this has happened a lot with this phenomenon, with this experience, is that I'll meet people finally, and it's like I know them, but I don't know how. And I'm sure you've heard about this. Um, she's
yeah,
amazing, and she knows a lot about the hybrids and the edit. I'm just about to get to that point, but I'd be curious to, and she's someone you may want to have on your show. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about the hybrids.
I feel like it's definitely happening. I have
Yes.
people in my book, like women who have missing pregnancies.
Mm-hmm.
There's one woman in the book who, the doctor confirmed the pregnancy. She was months in, and she wakes up, the child's gone. And so she said that they went into the doctor when somebody has a miscarriage like this. They need to like do some cleaning and look after her body and what have you. But the doctor said it looks like that's already been done. It's like you had an abortion somewhere else and the doctors were great and they really cleaned you up well. And she said, no, I went to bed at night. Next morning I wake up, the pregnancy's gone. And then there was a guy who was taken into a room and there was almost like all these portraits of all these people. And they were all his children, his hybrids. And they asked him if he wanted to name them. And he said he got a bit flippant. He said, all right, that's McCoy, that's Spock, that's Kirk.
Oh,
And then there was somebody else, this woman who she had a child, a baby, and the Greys said, "We need you to love this child. It's not surviving. It needs human contact." And she sat with it for a couple of hours, and she said she didn't have children. She never really wanted children. She didn't feel like a maternal person, but she kind of fell in love with this child. And when the child kind of got better and better, the Greys came and took that child away and said, "Do you want to meet your other children?"
Huh.
So they took her to this room, and there were maybe 30 hybrids in this other room. But she said they were all different levels of hybrid between alien and human, and she felt no connection to those. And he said it was like they were kind of bored, almost like they know who she is, but yeah, big deal. Why do you want us here? What were we doing? And she left those children behind, didn't have any contact with them. And then there's somebody else, maybe Sev Tok, who was looking after a baby, and they said to put her hands on it to heal it, and it was wrapped in all this cloth. And the baby
Oh,
started rolling forward, and she went to pull the baby back. The cloth came off, and she said the neck of the baby was about as big as her pinky. And yeah, so you hear all these sorts of things because it looked like a normal size head, and then she was shocked to see how thin the neck was on this child.
Judy Goldschmidt, who's one of the cases that we did a film about. Two amazing things from that relates to what you're talking about. Uh, One is that there were all these babies on a shelf. Well, she didn't know they were babies. It was like these. It was like a wrapping of cloth, and then they would hand them each one of them, and inside of that cloth, that blanket or whatever was wrapped all around them was a baby, just like you described. The other thing was interesting is that they would ask the people to name the child, and she named the child Petal. And when I was talking to Beth just a few days ago, recording her, she was talking about the children being the hybrids being named, and one of them was named Petal. And it just I got the chills. And
Yeah,
it could be just a coincidence, but of all the names that she brought up, was that name that was from, you know, uh, Beth is not someone who watches a lot of material. She's starting to now, but she hadn't at that time. And I suppose it's possible she saw Judy's show, but I really didn't get that feeling of dishonesty from her in any way, shape, or form. And she seemed rather shocked when I said that's what Judy named her child. And maybe it was the same child that she was seeing. I don't know. But there's a lot of synchronization here with the things we're talking about, that seem to give validity to
yeah,
what other
and
people.
that
These people don't know each other. They're talking about exactly the same things before they're even made
and
public.
that name isn't a very yeah. The name's not a very common name
No.
because there may be a lot of Jennifers, but there's not a lot of Petals.
And it was very sort of sickly looking and somewhere between gray and human, and yes, a thin neck. I had to replicate it in which he described, and uh, you see it at the very end of the show. It's the Judy Goldschmidt experience, I think it's called. So it's not a conversation like we're doing now. It's she came to the studio and flew out, and we put our cameras on her and let her tell her story. So
Yeah, yeah, I think I've seen that. That's got a big amount of views, hasn't it?
yeah, it's a couple 100,000 views, which is a lot for our channel. It really is, because what we have found is that our channel remains somewhat small. We don't have a lot of subscribers. We have a lot of views, um, but because we're not in the business of entertainment, um, and we're not performance artists like so many of the channels are, and they are. I mean, everybody's uh, got clickbait, and they sort of exploit the subject and overdo it just to get people to watch, and that's what the public overall likes. So we seem to attract the people who are quiet, who really have these experiences, and it took a long time to get their trust to come and talk to us. And then they all became friends and formed this community, and it's pretty amazing because these are not the UFO stars. Although Deborah Cobble's in there, and she would be mad at me for relating her to a UFO star because she's not a big fan of what she. In fact, she's the one that coined that term to me. But this is all real folks, all real people. You know, like in Close Encounters up on the hill. You know.
Yeah.
stop and be
It's
friendly.
almost the thing, the aliens aren't having contact with the leaders of the world and all the different countries. They're going for the ordinary people.
They are. And is that something you talk about in the book? Because that's something that really fascinates me.
Well, not really, no. Well, there is one question I ask in the book. It's if children are having these encounters, how is the child chosen? I mean, if they can't visit every single child and
No.
decide, yeah, this is the one we want to work with, this one we don't want to work with. So how do they know which child they want to work with? The the Greys, how do they know that they wanted to see you when you were a child? How did they work that out? That's an interesting question.
Well, from my perspective, personally, it feels to me that we agreed to do this. We agreed to live a human life. So what better way, without the knowledge of who we were before, whatever that was, because this would be the best way to collect the data, the knowledge and the understanding of what it is to be human, uh, the best way it could ever be done. So if we did make an agreement and we're placed in human bodies, uh, since we all have souls, without a real memory of where we were before, um, they would know where we were and they would come back and check on us. They might uh, bring us up to the craft and do examinations and making sure that our health is, because it would be, they have a vested interest. It would be in their best interest to make sure we remained healthy as much as possible without giving themselves away. And one of those ways of giving yourself away is to take a child out of a woman and have the doctor try to understand how that happened. Today, that would be quite dangerous in this country because you go to jail for miscarriages in this country, and that would be classified a miscarriage. And if your only answer was, look, I have experienced this with non-human intelligence, and I woke up one morning and it was gone, they must have taken it, you're definitely going to jail. So I don't know how you deal with that now. Something that's really disturbing until we get rid of this monster, and roll back
Yeah,
things, you know. But going back to the original question, it would explain why they have a right to take you. Um, and going back to my experience with the praying mantis and meditation, taking me back to my first day in school, uh, in not kindergarten, but my first day in first grade. I think that's purpose was for me to remember how I felt, and I didn't feel like I belonged there, and I didn't feel like I was really human. I knew I was. I knew I could look down at myself, but it just felt wrong. It just felt like this is not who I was or where I've been, and it was kind of terrifying to me. It took a while to settle in, and I had to be quiet. So that might be an answer, and you might get that answer from a lot of other people. I know the people that I'm working with would give you that same answer.
yeah. It's a hard thing in a way because they might say to you, "You agreed to this," but then you could say, "Well, I didn't. Steve didn't agree to this. Maybe my soul did or my spirit, but I didn't get the memo, and now I'm
Yeah.
getting scared out of my wits as a child."
Yeah. I wasn't really scared. I mean, I go back to it honestly, and I remember that face looking at me in the crib. That's the one thing I remember, but the real memory is the one you saw in the film. And I wish I had put the crib thing in the film, but I wasn't thinking about it at the time. And um, but that moment in San Francisco in 1958, when I was only 6 years old, and I woke up to that deafening silence in the middle of a city, San Francisco, of all places, and seeing the lights in my room. And I remember, I remember feeling a little chill, but I was such a curious kid, especially about science and uh, astronomy and all those things. So even at that age, I was very fascinated. And so when I saw the lights coming in my room and it was so quiet, I could just hear myself breathe and nothing else. Um, I was hesitant to go see where they were coming from, but I was careful. I laid close to the ground. I stayed against the wall, and I peeked. I got under the windowsill so the lights couldn't see me, and I peeked over and looked up, and then that's when the lights just shined right in my face, like, oh, there he is. And then I remember feeling a
Oh,
little anxiety, and then when I went and hid under my desk, I thought I'd be safe there, but then the lights came in the room. I don't want to call it fear. I felt a real rush from it. It was exhilarating. Like, wow, this is really amazing. And yeah, it's a little scary, but and then I saw the shadow, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in my parents' bedroom on their rug in front of the bed, because I too, as you described in your book, and as you just spoke about, I would get into bed and sleep between them, and they got tired of it. And so they told me they didn't want me doing that. You're a big boy. You're just having nightmares. Because I didn't go into detail, but I just said there's these lights coming in my room and stuff. And they said, oh no, it's just nightmares. And um, so they put me back in bed. But then I would sneak back sometimes and just sleep on the rug where they couldn't see me. And then when it was light out, the morning would come, I'd go back to my bed. So this is quite
mm.
common. And I know you know that.
Yeah, yeah, and there's some of the people in my book talk about their parents because actually it's volume two I'm working on at the moment. I got a
Right.
chapter called Family Experiences, and there's one where a boy, he sees these two greys in his room and he screams. He's like 6 years old, and his mum comes in and he tells her what happened. Then the next night happens again. The next night happens again, and she's saying it's just nightmares. And then one night she just comes in and says, "Look, whatever happens, you're going to have to deal with it yourself. Because whenever I come in here, they've gone by the time I get here." And he felt really upset about it. But then there's almost a thought of, did she know what was going on? Has she had experiences? And she knew that there's nothing she could do about it. And
Yes.
that's another thing. There was a boy who was having um, clowns in his room. All these little clowns would show up and be dancing
Oh
around
boy.
and
Yeah.
trying to interact with him. And he told his parents about it, and they were evangelical, and they said they were demons, and they took him to church, and they were shouting at him. They're saying they're only coming to you because you have evil thoughts. You're an evil child. You're bringing them upon yourself. And so that shut him down. And what we find a lot is that parents basically shut down the child, so the child doesn't have any confidence to talk about it to them or anybody. And it's like the parents are helping the ETs keep the whole thing secret.
Yeah, my mom was very quiet about it, and the only time I really brought up the subject matter to her was when I'd see a UFO. And one night, I found myself out on the back porch. This is when we were living in Pacifica. There was a Nike base above us, and I don't even, I would bet you it was about 3 in the morning, but I don't know for sure. But I was on the back porch in my underpants and a t-shirt. Um, and I'm looking up at the Nike base, and there's a hat-shaped UFO saucer up there, and it wasn't brightly lit. It was kind of dimish, but it was there. And I had my friend Mike and I used to look for UFOs. Used to go up on his roof at night, and he spent the night that night, and I could not get him awake. It was impossible. I literally dragged him out to the porch to see it, and he looked at it, and he turned around and went right back into the bedroom and went back to sleep. And my mom said, what's all the noise and all that? And I said, there's a UFO out here. And she got really mad and said, I have to go to work in the morning. You're keeping me awake. And something about there's no such thing as UFOs. Of course, the next morning, I'm sitting there at the table with breakfast, and she brings in a newspaper and says, that UFO you saw last night, you said you saw, it's in the paper.
Mm.
It was seen by the Nike base, and other people had seen it evidently. But that was it. And she just went quiet about that. But then a couple of years before she passed, and we started talking again because we really were estranged for about 18 years, uh, she spilled her guts to me. She knew something all along because it was happening to her. And what she described to me being with my grandmother and sitting on the porch where her house was way out in the middle of nowhere. She had a ranch, and she described this dark disk. And the reason she could see it is because the stars were plentiful. And this dark hole was like Felix the Cat's black hole was moving across the sky. And when it got close to them, it started shining lights onto the porch. And this made them a little scared. And so they went into the house, and the lights followed them through the windows into the house and started searching through. And then my mom went silent. And I said, "What happened after that?" She says, "I really don't know. Maybe I should get regressed." She had been following me on television during the 90s when I made many appearances with Yvonne Smith, sometimes with Whitley Strieber, Roger Lear, and Jacques Vallée, and many other people. And it's funny how it started. She said, "I've seen you on television with that Whitley Strieber." And when she first said that to me, I thought, "Oh God, here we go. She's going to tell me I'm nuts and all this stuff." She was quite the contrary, Simon. She said she's been seeing things, and she described that night, and she had known all along.
Yeah. It's sad in a way, isn't it? That
It is.
you and others could have had support, much more support and understanding.
And we
But
never
this is the
did.
way the world is in a way, isn't it? Like you, the people think you're nuts if you come up with this stuff. You don't want to admit it to anybody. Sometimes,
But if I see Jesus and a cupcake, that's fine.
yeah, yeah.
And
I think
now,
that there's yeah,
go ahead.
there's a. I think there's a story. I think this is in the second volume of a girl when she was at school and she was like 7 or 8, and she was terrified of being found out. And she'd be picked up a lot, and she wouldn't talk to anybody about it. And then a boy in her class started saying he'd seen her naked, and he was saying it to everybody. And she was like, What's he talking about?" And then he'd say, "I saw you on the spaceship. When I was there, you had no clothes on." And that really freaked her out, but it really upset her as well for a long time.
Did you ever, in all your testimonies, come across people, and this is something they were very shy to talk about? Whitley wrote about it in Solving the Communion Enigma, which really got me to open up about it. But I have a very clear memory of people coming to my house in San Francisco at night in fedoras, in trench coats, in black car. It just sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? And they would come and take me from the house. And my parents must have known about it, I would assume. At least my mother did. And they'd take me to my school that wasn't too far from my home in San Francisco on 47th Avenue. It was called Lafayette. And the school was not lit well at all inside once we got there. And there were all these other children, and they were all in their night clothes. And we're all standing in the hallway. And we were, led into rooms and shown films. But we also went into rooms where there were doctors, human doctors. And um, I remember getting like what felt like a shot in my arm that burned, and getting examined. And they were asking us questions. It's like we're being interrogated about what was happening to us. In fact, I'm sure that's what it was. Have you ever got that from anyone else?
The hints of something like that, yeah. In the chapter, my MyLab chapter, there's a kid. Well, when he was a kid, he remembers being in an elevator that was going up really fast. And then when the door opened, he was in the local public library, and his mum was there, and she was really upset. She'd been searching for him for ages. And he remembers that something happened at the bottom of where that elevator was, which would have been a long way underground, and that there was something to do with the military there and uniforms. And I've had somebody else say something like that when they were a kid, it was like they were being tested for their IQ, and they were being tested for their emotional response and that kind of thing. And that was very much not like being in the middle of the night, them just being picked up by people, not aliens. So I've heard sort of little things like that.
Yeah, Well, when I was working with Yvonne, and one morning I woke up and I clearly remember that something had happened. I remember bits and pieces of it quite well. I remember being on my back with a human doctor, and I could describe him. He was 40s, balding, dark hair. It was bald on top, dark hair. He had a very dark mustache. He had glasses on that were black rimmed. Um, he had a white coat on with an ID badge of some sort that Yvonne kept under hypnosis trying to get me to read, and I really couldn't get it all. It's like I was being blocked. But there were grays there, and they did a operational procedure on my skull with a device, and I can remember a lot of it, but I went into a lot more detail. And then later on, I had another experience where I woke up. I'm in a room. There's a bunch of people on tables, and they're all passed out. They're not conscious. But I woke up and I got up and I went to these doors that opened, and I opened them up and went into a hallway. And as I did that, this gray came out from one of the doorways and looked at me, and then it scurried off rather quickly. And I could see down the end of the hallway were two swinging doors. I went all the way down there, and I went through the doors. And when I came out, I was outside of a building, but it wasn't on the surface, it was underground. As you can imagine, an enormous cavern of open space underground with all these like Quonset hut type medical or some kind of structures built there. And then I could hear a Jeep coming. And then just as I'm hearing the Jeep, like you could hear, I know what cars sound like because I'm a car person, and it was definitely a Jeep, and I could hear it driving, and I couldn't see it. And then I remember being grabbed from behind by humans in dark uniforms of some kind, and they pulled me back. They weren't real aggressive or rough with me, but I remember just blacking out. And those are my two memories I have of mill lab type stuff. And then I never got it again, thankfully.
Yeah, because when I first started hearing about MyLab stuff, I wasn't sure what to make of it.
I'm
It
not.
seems pretty crazy that people could get away with that. But Deborah Corbell said she was at a cabin in the woods with her boyfriend, and she was taken by people, and she woke up in a bed, and there was a doctor. She said he had a very strong Southern American accent, not South America, but Southern states, and he was quite old, and he was injecting her with something, and he said to her, "Don't worry, this won't hurt." And then he said something like, "I don't know why I'm even talking to you. You won't remember this."
Yeah. Yeah, I remember Debbie telling me about that. And she might even talked about it in our show, but we talk quite often. And I think what I think is that they know what's going on, and they know that they're not in control in any way, and they're not sure what's being done to the people that are being taken. Um, they might know a lot more about it than we realize, but it's almost like they're worried that, well, in those classrooms, what the way Terry described it, and the way I described it, and the way Susie Hansen described it, we were moving things with our mind. And if we've been taught to do that, or we're allowed to reconnect with an ability we all have, but is dormant in us because it was literally beat out of us over the thousands of years, it would be very worrisome to them if they suddenly couldn't have any control over you. They tried to put their hands on you, their hands wouldn't be able to. They tried to shoot at you, they wouldn't be able to. There'd be nothing, no violence involved. It wouldn't be like looking at someone and slamming him against the wall. It would never be used for that, but it could be used in a way that no matter what they did, they could have no control over you, and you could do what you want. This is something that comes up over and over again with me, is that they're concerned, they're worried, because the last thing they want to be is not in control. That's everything to the powers that be. So, and here they've been taking kids for how long and teaching them these techniques and stuff, and they're laying dormant in us. But what if they get switched on one day? You know, it makes me wonder if there's not some of that coming in the day of disclosure.
Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah. And it may be that also those people who are in charge of that stuff, they want to work out how it's done so they can weaponize it.
Oh yeah, or weaponize us. So they
Yeah.
would take. They knew at an early age what was going on somehow.
Yeah, that's weird as well, actually, now that you mention it. How did
Yeah.
they know? How did they know you were a child that should be investigated?
What I find interesting about that one particular X Files episode, and I knew Chris Carter, and he was a very nice man, but he also knew a lot about this stuff more than he was talking about, like Spielberg, and I understand that. But that one episode where the president comes in and it's all black and white, and he's got the flag, and he kneels down to the graves and puts the flag down, and over to the left are the women and children, and they're being taken as though there was some deal made. That always I always found that scene really spooky because uh, maybe they know because they were told.
Yeah, it's difficult to know, isn't it?
And
And then
again, it was the regular people. It wasn't, they weren't taking kids higher up, billionaires' families or that kind of thing. They just were going for the regular people. So I think
and if
it's
they've been told, who else has?
yeah,
Because this is a worldwide phenomenon.
it
Does that mean
is.
British government knows, the Russians know, the Chinese know about it?
Yeah, I think they do.
We're getting all conspiracy theory now.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, I haven't seen S4, the Bob Lazar story yet, but I don't know how you feel about him. But the first time I ever saw him, I just knew he was telling the truth. And then years later, um, an expert in facial expression and body language that works with the court system and works with lawyers to be able to identify whether a witness is lying or not, decided to go after him and analyze him and see if he's really telling the truth or not. And he concluded that he was, and he's not the only one. Um, and if what Bob is saying is as true as matter of factly as he talks about it, he's so relaxed. Um, it's really amazing. It's really world changing, and that they have these craft. Why do they have them? The I would imagine that the visitors could take them away anytime they wanted to, but they kind of gave it to them and said, "Well, here, play with this. You're on your own with it." All they've been able to do is to get it to hover, and they have to be careful how much they use it because once the fuel runs out, they've got a nice saucer. They can't do anything with it. They can't even explain how it works. But they have had limited success in getting him to operate, and to hear him talk about it, I I agree with the specialist that he is not lying. He absolutely knows or believes, depending what you want to use, that his experience is real. And to the people who say, well, he lied about the college he went to, his records were removed. He did go, and was able to prove it. Uh, have you seen that Bob Lazar story yet?
I haven't yet, but
Yeah.
I do remember when he first came on the scene in the 90s, and I was, like, reading everything I could about him over in the
Yeah,
UK. You probably got more information over there, but
maybe.
I did go into quite detail with it, and when he was talking about the antimatter reactor and the element 115 and how there's 3 different sections underneath the craft, and it's the way the anti-gravity works, and there's gravity A and gravity B, so I did get quite into it. And I do think over time, since the 90s, other people have come up with other descriptions of things. which kind of confirmed what Bob Lazar was saying in the
Yeah,
first place.
like element 115, it was discovered, but only years after he talked about it.
And we,
And
we can't make it even now.
no, no, it's a very dense material. The other thing I love is the description of the interior of the craft. He says, it'd be very hard to put a person in there. I don't know how you'd even get them to sit in those little chairs. It's very cramped, and you practically have to kneel down to move with inside of it. It wasn't made for people, human beings. It was made for little tiny grays. Um, so because of that, if he is telling the truth, and I believe he is, then certainly all the world powers know, and they've been keeping it from us for 80 years. And there's a great line in the newer trailer for the Day of Disclosure, uh, where the podcast gentleman says this 80 years of terror has to come, of terror campaign has to come to an end. And I mean, here we have J.D. Vance going on national television, and what does he say about the aliens, as he calls them? They're demons. There's nothing good about them. And that threat narrative is being pushed real hard by the Defense Department, um, by the Pentagon, the War Department, as it's called now, uh, and there's a reason for it. And I think the reason is that it's not a threat. Our realization that these things are real, that there are visitors here, is the real threat to them because it undermines their power.
Yeah. Undermines religions as well.
Yeah, though I think that the religions are going to be okay with it, and the same, I mean, look what's going on with the Pope right now. I would love to have a conversation with him about it, but just how he talks about one thing and one thing only is that we have to love each other and be at peace and stop having war. And you know what? That's the same message I keep getting from my visitors. And now the Pope's talking about this, and so many religions are talking about this, and the Buddhists are talking about this. And I have a feeling that if there was some kind of disclosure, and the only way that will happen is if the visitors themselves do it. It's up to them. They're the only ones that can reveal themselves openly to the population of the world. But if they were to do that, and it's a big if, because I don't think we're ready, I would imagine that the Dalai Lama and the Pope would calm the religious community about it. Not that Buddhism is religion, but spiritual, but they really are related. They both have the same intentions. At least that's my theory. That they'd be okay with it. Whether or not their followers would be up to them because that's who
Yeah.
they
I
love.
suppose they say God created the universe. Then why didn't he create life on other planets when he was doing that?
Yeah. This whole thing with demons is just ironically the people that are telling you that the visitors are demons are really describing themselves. I mean, look what they've done. Who kills people on a mass scale like that, and causes so much suffering? And these are human beings, and they're the ones calling the visitors demons.
Yeah. It's ironic because Trump was trying to get the Nobel Peace Prize, wasn't he?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then you look at Hessek and how he behaves. It's unbelievable. Mary and I were talking about it last night. You can't write this stuff, and you hear that expression, but you really can't write what's going on now. And it makes me think of Philip K. Dick and Man in the High Castle. Well, this is Man in the Not So High Castle, as I coined it last night. You know, but it's just unbelievable what's going on. And a lot of people who don't have these experiences are saying, "Why don't your aliens intervene and stop this?" It will always be up to us to stop it. It'll always be up to us to fix this. You
Yeah,
might get some guidance from them. You might
I,
get guidance from your spirit guides or whoever you were in contact with, but it's up to us. That's why we're here.
I think there's somebody in my book who says that the ETs, the aliens, whatever you call them, would not have outright contact and disclosure with the human race until the human race really understands who we are, which is spiritual beings who are eternal. And the ETs are well aware of that. We must look so backward. But there's also this idea that because things are so bad on Earth, that affects other life and other planets in some
Yes,
way.
it
Um,
does. Where everything's connected. You disturb one thing in the environment, in the ecosystem, it affects everything else in it, like a domino going down. No, that's true. You know, Simon, what they told me recently, the message I got was very, very simple. And they said, if you're seeking peace, you have to find it in yourself first.
yeah. Don't constantly watch stuff on the internet that's going to bring you down and annoy you and make you angry. And that lowers your frequency and might make you feel more aggressive because you get so angry about what you're hearing about. You've got to have
Yeah.
the right level.
Mary and I pretty much stopped doing that. I certainly have. She monitors what's going on in the world. I stick to my work. I'm always editing and making shows and working on my hobbies and making films, and um, it's helped a lot. I don't even watch my own channel. She checks on the comments and she keeps up what's going on in there because sometimes um, we can get some nasty bits in there. You know, not very often, but we do, and we do, it's not nice, and I don't want to see it. You know, and she removes the comment, or the person persists, she bans them. But there's always that going on. Before we close, Simon, I wanted to give you an opportunity to share anything you felt you haven't or wanted to share so far about your new book, um, which is highly anticipated for
Yeah.
me. I mean, I have the PDF here. I can't wait to get it in my hands.
Uh, yeah. Well, the thing is, I suppose to remember it's volume one, and working on volume two is taking time. And I'm hoping I'll get it out by the end of the year, maybe early next year. The things that are in there that I'm covering, I got the list right here. I've written a chapter about the abduction begins, and this is about how people say, whether it's in their bedroom or their car or wherever they are, how it all comes together that they are picked up. And then I've got family experiences. Then I've got another chapter of high strangeness because so much of that came up.
Yeah.
And then I've got one about the compulsion to go somewhere. Of people who report that they get a sudden compulsion in the middle of the night. They have to go to a certain location, and it's really hard to fight it off. And when they get there, that's when they're picked up. And then I've got a chapter about missing time, a chapter about things that happen on board a craft that are not this kind of thing when you're on a table. There's other things that happen. And there's a small chapter about people who meet someone and they say, "Hang on, I recognize you from the craft." And
Oh,
they say,
yes.
"Yeah, I remember you."
Yep.
And I've
It
got a chapter
happened to
about
me.
implants. Yeah. And also people flying a craft. People say that they've been trained to be a pilot of the craft. So what is it all about? And I think that's the people who are trained to fly the craft as the I never know what to call them, visitors, aliens, ETs, greys, but what they tell these people, you need to be trained up for this because you're going to need to do this at some point in the future. But they don't say what it is that's going to happen where they'll need all these people flying all these craft.
Did you see my film, The Invited? Because that was, you described it quite well, where this guy is sitting in his study and he just gets this impulse. This image keeps coming in his mind. He gets in his truck and he drives off into the desert and meets with them, and he goes with them. It's a short film I did.
I
It's called
don't
The
think,
Invited. Yeah, it's on the channel,
yeah,
but
I'll have
that's
to,
exactly that. I mean,
yeah, definitely have to have a look at
everything you're describing that's yet to come and gives us all something to look forward to, even before we get the first book. Um, I'm very familiar with. You
Yes,
haven't brought up anything that I'm not familiar with, and I'm sure with my listeners here or audience and community, they will tell you the same.
yeah, and I'm hoping that there are people out there who get both volumes who don't really know all the detail, who have an interest, and this will take them next step on in finding out what's going on out there. Because it seems that there is a programming that's been there for decades, and
Yeah.
it's very well organized and it's very complicated. And so the visitors are really know what they're doing. They're not just scientists who happen to stumble over somebody at night and pick them up and let's examine this one. But yeah, the book's out on May 25th, and people can get the or can pre-order Kindle now. But yeah, I'm recording the audio book at the moment as well.
Oh, okay. Um, with experiences with the afterlife, I think I got the name wrong. Was that was wrong with it? Oh, yes, near verified near death experiences. You were talking about you hope that people would read this new book about alien abduction. Um, People who don't have the experiences would read it, and you would hope that they would get something from that that told them that there is something to this subject matter, that it deserves taking a closer look. Did you get that with near death experiences, verified near death experiences? Did anyone come forward to you and
I
say,
don't
Simon, I never believed in this stuff, but I read your book and I got to tell you, you didn't ever get anyone coming forward?
No, not like that. I think it's people who are into this subject already. You know, there's some uh, I get a lot of 5-star reviews, thankfully, on Amazon, and 2 or 3 people have said, "I thought I knew every near-death experience story out there, but in this book, there's some I've never heard of before." Um, so it seems like the people they know what's going on are reading it, which it'd be
Yeah,
nice to pass it on. My wife's aunt, who's like 90 years old, she read it. She knew nothing about this stuff, but she said she just found it disturbing.
disturbing.
So
Well,
yeah,
a lot of that might be due to the fact that people, especially when you get to be older, you're okay with that. When you pass away, that's it, you're done, you're finished, there's nothing else. And then to suddenly be told, no, you go on to a different form of existence in an astral plane or whatever that may be, I could see how that could be frightening to some people, because in this life, in this physical reality, you have a sense of 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 a sort of somewhat rational world that makes sense to you, that you've been taught about since the time you were early as a child, and then suddenly you're told you're going to be thrusted into an environment where you can fly any place you think of, you can be, and you could be in other worlds, and you can see your passed on pets and your loved ones and your family. I can see how that's could be terrifying to some people. It's not to me, but I'm not typical. I remember past lives.
yeah,
I remember two in particular, and I know what happens. And but to someone else, cold turkey, I can understand why they'd be afraid.
yeah. You might be feeling like, oh, if I'm going to die soon, I think at last I'll be able to have a rest. But then you find out, oh, no, you're very busy afterwards.
Yeah, well, or when you're in the astral plane or whatever you choose to call it, you can choose to have that rest. There's no one tells you have to come back. You don't have to agree to come back again. You can hang out for a while with your mates and have a good time and rest. That might be a million years. It might be 100 days. It might be a year. It's all relevant there because time doesn't exist. And when you pop back here, you pop back here. It sounds really easy and convenient, but from what I understand and researched as you have, it's the way it is.
Yeah. And the viewpoint from the other side, the afterlife of a life on Earth, is like if you're 80 years here, for them, it's just like 5, 10 minutes.
It's
It's
very
no big
quick.
deal.
It takes me back to that episode of Next Generation I can't remember the name of it, with Picard, where he passes out on the bridge because they see this probe, and he lives a whole life on another planet, and then wakes up again on the bridge of the Enterprise 20 minutes later with this loss of this whole life he had lived elsewhere. And I've actually had that experience in a dream where I lived a whole life and had that same effect. I actually met the writer of that episode, and we had a party, a Star Trek party at my film studio. A lot of notables from Star Trek were there, and he was there. Someone brought him, and I asked him, "Did you know about that? That people dream entire lifetimes?" He'd never heard of it before. He said, "No, it's just the idea that I had." Yeah, I told him, "Yeah, that really does happen with people. It's very. I think this is what's scary to people. You know, it's
Yeah,
not your
people in
ab.
comas report that as well.
Yeah, that's another book, isn't it?
Yeah, I was thinking of doing that, but no one would talk to me.
Huh.
I got onto some coma like Facebook groups, and I was asking, and so many of them talked about terrible, horrific nightmares that would be on a loop while they were in coma, that were hyper realistic. And they thought that's what I was looking for, but I wasn't. I was looking for ordinary life experiences.
They're there. I'm sure they are.
Yeah, yeah,
So
and
Simon,
it's all connected in some way.
anything else you'd like to share with us? Because we've come to
We've
the
run out of
end of our
time.
hour. Yeah, we actually went over, but that's fine. We
Well, yeah. Well, I've got the Alien UFO podcast. It's got a couple of hundred episodes. The Paranormal Afterlife podcast, and I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I take people through past life regression. So
wow.
check out my website, pastliveshypnosis.co.uk.
I'll be sure to put up the link as you're speaking in the edit. So Simon, thanks so much for being here again, and it's always been a pleasure. And I'm very excited to read Volume 1 and Volume 2.
Well, I'll show you volume 2 as soon as I got it finished, way
Okay.
before it's published.
Well, hopefully, if see when's Contact in the Desert is the end of May, so if I get it before then, I will bring it there and let people take a look at it. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
fantastic. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me as a guest again. It's been really good.
Anytime. We have to have you back again soon. We really want to thank you for subscribing to our channel. And so that you never miss a new episode or a movie, please hit the notification bell. Thank you.